Welcome, everyone, to the Zeitgeist Movement Global Radio Show. My name is Ryan Dyment from the Toronto chapter. I'm also here with
Lawrence Alvarez, also from the Toronto chapter.
And Emily Charles Donaldson, who's in the corner not wanting to talk. So, today we're very honored to be with the author of Sacred Economics and the Ascent of Humanity and the Yoga of Eating and a forthcoming book that we might be touching on today, the wonderful Charles Eisenstein, who we've been very fortunate to spend the weekend with. Why don't you say hello, Charles?
Hello.
All right. So, for those of you unfamiliar with Charles's work, he has his most recent publication is called Sacred Economics. If you get a chance to check it out, sacred-economics.com, you'll see a wonderful video about his work, a quick synopsis that we were told was actually 6 hours of material cut into about 12 minutes for your viewing pleasure. But today we're going to ask him more questions related to a resource-based economy and the Zeitgeist movement in general, and see what his thoughts are, and perhaps for your if your listening pleasure, we could expand upon some of the ideas that he has in his book. So, with that, let's get started. All right. So, Charles, for people who aren't familiar with your work, maybe you can give us, if you can, a short introduction, perhaps.
Sure. Well, I guess I'll start with the title of the book, Sacred Economics, which for a lot of people is a contradiction in terms. And so really the book asks, why is money not sacred today? In other words, why does it always seem that money is the enemy of all the beautiful things that we want to do with our lives and the enemy of ecological health and social justice? Why is that when money is nothing but a social agreement? And then more importantly maybe, how could it be different? How could we create a money system that's aligned with the things that are becoming sacred to us? Maybe they're not sacred to everybody yet, but they'd better be soon if we're going to have a planet to live on.
Yes, exactly. Well, I'm sure most of us know exactly what you mean. You do. Transition and ecological crises, economic crises are the forefront of the thoughts of people in this movement. So when you talk about transition, I think we could all relate to those ideas, certainly. And you do arrive at this gift economy that you talk of in your book, and it has very much to do with the monetary system as it is, which Zeitgeist is very interested in talking about a lot. But the solutions that you come to, I guess, are slightly different than ours, or that the movement, I guess, primarily advocates for, a resource-based economy. Are you familiar much with resource-based economy and its tenets?
Yeah. I mean, I've heard a little bit about it. I've read a short description of it. People tell me about it sometimes, and I often get asked what I think about it.
Okay.
You do mention it in your book, though.
Oh, I do? Really?
Yeah.
Do I?
You do twice, yeah. You mentioned it once. You referred to the Venus Project. I would say not in a very detailed sense, but you do say that it's kind of a techno-utopia.
Yeah, I definitely tend to be a bit wary of worldviews that say in one form or another technology is going to save us, because I think that if technology were going to save us, it already would have. Even with existing technology, we could be living in paradise on this planet. The reason that we're not isn't because we don't have the technology to do it. It's because we're not using the technology in a way that benefits human well-being at all, really.
Absolutely.
So if that doesn't change, if our attitudes and beliefs and relationships and the way that we see ourselves and the way that we see our relationship to the planet don't change, then any technology that we have, there's no reason to think that it's going to bring a result any different than previous technology has brought. Futurists have been predicting a coming technological utopia for centuries. And it's always just around the corner. It's always this next thing, electricity. That's going to do it. Atomic power, the computer, nanotechnology. It's one thing after another. And we're still waiting. So I think that something else has to happen. not that technology is not a part of it. There are amazing, wonderful, miraculous technologies out there that I'm excited about them too, but I just don't put my trust in that. Something else has to happen.
So it's also obviously coming down to our culture and our values and how we approach the way that we live and our interaction with the planet and other people. I mean, there's coming at it, I guess people coming at it from a values perspective and from a technical perspective. The movement likes to talk about the technical aspect, but they don't discount human behavior as a technical study, and how we can study that, what motivates people, what inspires people, and we look at motivations. A lot of people say, well, we advocate for a system without money, but what would motivate people, and that really comes down to a lot of other aspects for human motivation, such as non-monetary aspects that people strive to achieve anyway. And you talk about this giving aspect, which is, is in a way contradicts being motivated by money if you're giving, essentially.
Right. Yeah, I pretty much disagree with economists' understanding of human nature, which is that basically they say, you don't want to work. If you could, you would just sit on the couch all day watching TV and eating chocolate bonbons. But we have this, this economic necessity that kind of induces you, rewards you for doing the work that you would probably rather not do. That's pretty much what economics talks about. It has this concept of the disutility of work. But I think that when we examine human nature and look into ourselves, you find that we're creative beings. And I meet people every day who are doing things that are of great service to society and the planet. And they're doing it despite the fact that there's no money in it. Mm-hmm. So I think it's patently untrue that we need to be motivated by economic necessity in order to bestir ourselves from the sofa. And so, fundamentally, I think one reason why so many people in the Zeitgeist movement are interested in my work, and I see a lot of value in the Zeitgeist material too. I think that we're both we're all approaching, maybe from slightly different directions, a new view of human nature, which at least new in industrial society. And I'll leave it at that for the moment.
Okay.
Well, I had a question about the incentive to participate in a gift economy, and it's something that you sort of touched on it with. I mean, there's thousands of hours of volunteer labor that go in. People are doing things without any monetary incentive, but in this different economy, because it's more than seems like just economics, the way that you package it. It's more than that. It's a worldview. It's a way of treating each other.
Yeah. I really the foundation of my work is the spirit of the gift and the desire that everybody has to contribute toward something beyond themselves. Sometimes people suppose that because I'm talking about the gift and gift economics, I'm also talking about the abolition of money. But really what I'm talking about is two things, really. One is the shrinkage of the money realm, because so many of our relationships are mediated by money that shouldn't be. They should be personal and direct. We probably shouldn't pay that much for food preparation. People should take care of each other in that very intimate way. We shouldn't pay for child care. We should create a lot more of our own culture. We should sing together. We should play together. We should help each other build our own houses and be involved in our material world a lot more, and not source these things from distant strangers. We'd be a lot happier that way. So that's part of the vision. Another part of the vision, though, is to transform money so that it takes on more of the properties that we associate with gift, including that it doesn't accumulate, but travels. The gift travels. If you are gifted, you want to give in turn. That's what gratitude is. It's the desire to give in turn, and that it flows in circles too, eventually. Whereas money and the monetized system isn't cyclical. It's linear or exponential. And the reason that I think, and this might be considered a disagreement with where the Zeitgeist movement goes with it, but I think that ultimately, well, for one thing, I kind of have a distrust of centralized systems of distribution and control. And perhaps there are kind of decentralized systems that could implement a resource-based economy. But I think that ultimately the computer that decides what resources go where has to be distributed on a mass level. You could say that money itself is a computer. It is a medium of information, and it calculates, in a way, what goes where. There has to be, so if you had a computer system that allocated resources, you have to have some way to feed information to that computer system, and that information has to be fed from every single one of these nodes that we call an individual and a firm, and the relative needs have to be taken into account, and the fact that these needs change over time and change daily and everything like that. So I think that, and this is a bit theoretical, but I think that when we really implement these things and explore them, we'll find that something very much like money has to be there in order to communicate the needs of different parts of the system. In a similar way that a body needs signaling molecules. If a certain tissue has a deficit of some mineral or some amino acid or something, it sends a message out to the body.
Right.
And so I think that as humanity gathers into a meta-human body, a collective body, we need something analogous to what happens. But let me just say that no one in the alternative economics movement knows what's going to happen. We are entering new territory. And we're going to have to learn. We're going to have to learn by trial and error.
Yeah. I think we could agree on that. I mean, really just the idea of transition is so vague, so unclear. Everybody has ideas that it'll have to have an ecological collapse or an economic collapse before anything were to change. And, your message actually doesn't really bring up collapse directly, at least not in your books. And in most of your talks, you acknowledge that this is a distinct possibility, but you have taken an optimistic view on it.
Oh, I have a very optimistic view, and that optimistic view includes the inevitability of collapse.
Okay. Okay, so there's no denying that reality that we're likely going to have to face, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. That's what you're saying. It's actually could be.
That's how change happens.
Yeah.
In whether it's in personal life or for a society or civilization, when the old way is working, you don't abandon it usually. At least that's how I work. Even if someone's telling me, Charles, you got to stop this. It's going to, lead to disaster if you keep on doing this behavior. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, but when do I actually stop? It's when I can't anymore. When it's staring me in the face, and even then, I might not stop.
Well, right. You see people smoking cigarettes out of their necks.
That's right.
And
right. And yeah, so there's no doubt that there has to be. That's how transformation happens. Mm-hmm. It's still an open question. How far down do we have to go? Like, what is a full collapse? What does that mean? Mm-hmm. It's similar to asking, when does the addict hit bottom? And it's different for different addicts.
Sure.
And so we need to begin to talk about, how do we raise bottom? How do we make it that we transition, at the point of the first trip to jail rather than on the deathbed? And I think for those of us in the movement, at least from my experience, most of us have not hit rock bottom. I think that we have gone through a transition in our lives to kind of come across this information and then
trying to make it a reality in our lives, and progress it the best way we can. But I mean, I don't know if, Lawrence, you've had a different experience, but would you say that people haven't really hit rock bottom most of the time when they're embracing this information? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's definitely different for different people, but I think for most of the people that I've met who are part of this movement, the information has come at them, and then they have taken it in almost at the expense of their old story, as Charles, you like to say. Like it has become its own sort of transformation, like a context of understanding the whole thing. So maybe not a rock bottom. More I look at it as a more ushered in. I tend to speak personally to ushered in a new way of looking at the entire world, like a new context for it. So that inevitably changed everything.
Mm-hmm. That's same with me. Yeah, basically. I mean, getting to know that information and becoming, intrigued enough to want to gather enough information to be convinced, I suppose, carried me forward. But at least, yeah, I haven't hit rock bottom yet. So
yeah.
Maybe I'll go through a further transformation. I don't know.
Can you speak to how you came to this information? It must be a huge story, but briefly.
Well, I was in my teens, like most kids. Some part of me knew that things are not supposed to be this way. The world is supposed to be much more beautiful than what's been offered me as normal. I think all young people have this understanding. And then a million messages tell them otherwise and say it's just going to have to be this way. You're just going to have to get used to it. You're going to have to adjust to it, to be well adjusted, and learn to make a living. And, if it were really that outrageous, the way things are, then people would be outraged. But they're not. No, they're talking about the Super Bowl. They're talking about the NHL. They're talking about Kim Kardashian. And the normalcy of the routines around us and the things that people think about communicate to us that you're a little crazy for thinking that things are not supposed to be this way. So I was like most young people in having that understanding, but I was fortunate in a few ways. One was that I grew up in a fairly radical household. My father especially was a strident critic of the government and the way things work and advertising, and one of my earliest memories was him jumping up in front of the television set, cursing at it, because there were pictures of the Vietnam War on there, and he was so angry. And then I started reading books, at a young age. You give a kid Gulag Archipelago to read when he's 15, Silent Spring, A People's History of the United States, like all of these books that confirmed my feeling. And it made it impossible for me to wholeheartedly participate in the program that was offered. So that's kind of my background. And we're all walking, our own individual path. And all of us, whether it blossoms forth in youth or whether it's suppressed, that seed is still there, that spark. And then any time in our lives, it could be 10, 20, 30 years later, any time that we catch a glimpse of how it's supposed to be, it could be just like even a moment in nature or a moment of cooperating with people and seeing here's how human beings could relate. And that kindles that spark into flame. And then, if that flame is strong enough, that can set other people on fire too. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's happening more and more now as normal falls apart and all the institutions that conspire to tell us that everything's okay fall apart. People are more sensitive to receiving that transmission, and a critical mass is gathering.
In the opening pages of The Ascent of Humanity, you had a couple of lines that said how we can envision a better world in a way, but it's almost relegated to out of reach and called heaven.
Right.
Or pushed too far forward and called utopia.
Yeah, that's one way to depotentiate the radical subversive potential of that feeling that we all carry. You just kind of project it into the other world. Say, yeah, no, this life is just like this, it's tedious and unfulfilling, and that feeling that you have, that's for the afterlife. Or that's something the scientists are creating right now in their labs, and soon they will unveil the future. So you just keep doing what you're doing,
Sure.
Yeah.
Someone else's. Okay. If we can, I'd like to step into a few of the slightly economic topics that you touch upon. I know your message goes far deeper than just traditional economics. So you mentioned complementary currencies as one aspect of a transition, at least, towards a gift economy. And you actually, I thought it was very interesting, as the first person I came across that really criticized very well some of these local currencies and their limitations, especially. Maybe why don't you talk about some of the limitations with some of these local currencies, and then some of the potential currencies that you think could be beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, any local currency, a lot of them are kind of U.S. dollar or Canadian dollar proxy currencies that have a fixed exchange rate with the dominant currency.
Yeah.
Those don't do very much to localize the economy. I think they're still valuable because at least they get people used to the idea that there are alternatives to the standard money system. They open people's minds, but most of them don't thrive. When the founder or the founding group gets burned out and stops promoting it, then they kind of evaporate, they disappear, and that shouldn't happen according to their theory. That these are going to give everybody an advantage, and people are going to want to use it. So there's something, and there's all kinds of impediments to them. Tax law, for example. So I think that maybe their time hasn't quite come. One type of complementary currency that I think is very useful is time banking. That reforges the helping connections within a community, and it helps recreate community. So I do have a pretty positive view on time banking, and I mean there's other places where they're really useful, especially if there's a high degree of local autonomy. If the local government gets involved in it, like happened in Argentina in 2001-2002, when the national economy, the national currency basically became non-functional, and then provinces and towns issued their own currency, and it worked really well, so well that the international banking system had a conniption fit and caved. Yeah,
I can't have a currency that works well. It's a big problem for society, sure.
Yeah.
Well, they couldn't even get money out of the bank. The banks were locked in Argentina, so
right.
People couldn't even access it.
Right, you had your money in the bank, but you can only withdraw, $30 a week or something like that.
Yeah. So it's kind of a necessity that it came. It came out of necessity. So perhaps it has to come out of maybe this rock bottom in a way.
Another example.
Yeah, another example.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's great. I mean, good time banking. Actually, I've studied quite a bit about time banking. We're starting one in Toronto soon, and if you don't know about it, you should look at Our World, HOUR world.org. They have a great setup, and it's free, and you can start a time bank very quickly, and they actually give you the training for free too. So, if you're thinking about doing that in your own city, as either a Zeitgeist project or just a related project, then I'd say that's a good resource. Let's talk about money again. I know you know a lot about money, and in your appendix you had a very detailed analysis, and you say, okay, well, some of the explanations in the Zeitgeist films, for example, or in Chris Martinson's Crash Course, are a bit simplified, and even you yourself, you had to go back and forth in several times to try and fully understand the money creation process, or certainly how it's distributed through the banking system. And I wonder if it was a complex chapter and probably too difficult to summarize quickly. But I don't know if you can do your best to say if the explanation that we see in these films, or that we hear about, it's kind of danced over. Money's produced through loans, and
No, I think that those descriptions of how money is created are for most intents and purposes accurate. They give you a correct understanding of the inevitable collapse of the system when the economy stops growing.
Right.
It only works if economic growth can come at least close to the prevailing rate of interest. And there has to be a positive rate of interest in the current system. So if you are looking at a degrowth economy or a steady state economy, which sooner or later, hey, we're on a finite planet here, right?
Sure. Well, we could keep on digging and mining asteroids. Apparently, that'll be the nanotechnology future that
right.
we have. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So right. So I mean, I definitely endorse Chris Martinson's Crash Course. I think it's a really elegant explanation of more or less how things work.
Sure.
And that appendix is, it's a bit, it's way too complicated to do right now. I mean,
sure.
I'm not sure if I could reconstruct from memery the argument I make there.
I read it like 3 times, to be honest.
Yeah.
I still think I have some questions for you, but we won't get into that. That's probably for another time. I can keep on going here. All right, so we talk about the gift economy on the internet. How is the internet playing a role today to support, I guess, or even initiate a gift economy?
Well, I mean, for one thing, it helps. It provides a way to connect, let's say, gifts and needs that money used to mediate. Markets with middlemen, and intermediaries and stuff, and the internet allows disintermediation that allows people with something they don't need to connect directly with the person who needs it. Money may be involved in that transaction, but at least you don't have to pay an intermediary to do that. So whether or not money is being used, it's reducing the role of money. So that's one way that the internet is enabling a gift economy. Now, another way, of course, is just digital goods. Like, for example, well, I mean, I don't even need to give examples, but things like Facebook, that's mostly a gift economy. Like, do you charge people to visit your page? Most websites do not charge money. That's a gift economy.
Right.
And then we could talk about open source software. We could talk about music and video and all these things, text, right? All these things that are now being circulated without having to pay for it.
Now, do you think the people that upload this software, that design this software, or interact with these websites, that they aren't paying for it? Do you think that they just draw a distinct line between internet life and the rest of their life, and how they interact with physical goods or people?
Well, maybe not. At least, though, having a gift economy in digital goods kind of conditions us to a different way of thinking, so that when digital goods are abundant in a very basic sense, once you've made one of them, there's almost no marginal cost involved in making a second or a third or a billionth of them.
Sure.
Right. Physical goods are generally not like that. However, and this is probably something that the Zeitgeist movement would argue quite forcefully for, this abundance is growing in the physical realm as well. It'll never be complete,
sure,
but really most of the scarcity already, even like disregarding any new technology, most of the scarcity that we experience today is artificial. Scarcity of food is the example I like to talk about. It's like half of all food is wasted in this country. So I guess the abundance of internet goods maybe is conditioning us or teaching us to perceive the world through eyes of abundance more generally. It also more directly affects our economic life, just because if you are not paying for software and all these other digital goods, then your cost of living is lower, so you don't need to make as much money. Your production costs are lower, if you're using open source software, for example, for your company. So it's an agent of economic degrowth in that sense as well. And as I mentioned before, when we're in a state of economic degrowth, the money system doesn't work.
So, a lot of, at least the way that I understand some of your message is, I don't know, it's building up community, and so is an online community as valid as a physical community? I mean, I think Lawrence, you and I watched this film, The Pirate Bay, and they had this away from keyboard, because they don't like to use the term IRL, right? In real life. So they say this is real life. This is the internet. This is a community just as much.
I don't know. I mean, I think online communities are generally very weak. They're real. In a real community, you look around at the people around you, and you know that you need them and they need you. Mm-hmm. But most online, quote, communities, if you just hit the delete key and ignore them, your life isn't necessarily made any less secure, or any poorer. You don't really necessarily need the people on those online forums, to the extent that we depend on, online reputation and depend on the internet to provide us with non-tangible social goods and stuff. Maybe there's some community, but it's not like, a community of Amish farmers in Pennsylvania, where if your house burns down, they're all going to come and build your house again.
Sure.
And you look around and you know that I need you and you need me. Mm-hmm. This is something that we're craving, because in a modern economy, you don't need anybody. Anything that you need, you pay for. You don't need your neighbors to help you out in any important way.
And you've talked about this, like this isolation or the separation that comes from that, from not needing the people, because you don't. I think you said, if the person who sells you a good goes out of business, that doesn't affect you so much.
Right. Pay somebody else to do it. If they die, pay somebody else to do it. I don't need you. And nobody needs you. Because whatever social function in a money economy that you fulfill is replaceable. Somebody else could fulfill that function.
Mm-hmm. In fact, it might even benefit you if they're your competitor, and they pass away, and isn't that great? Less competition. You say there's one line actually is related. The financially independent person is not bereft of community because he meets all his needs via money. He is bereft of community because he is not meeting his needs except through money. I thought that was a profound statement, because it just illustrates that point, that financial independence isn't the ultimate goal here.
Right. I think when people pursue financial independence, what they really want is something else that money cannot buy. They want the feeling of feeling at home in the universe, of being held in a web of connection, of knowing the faces around them, knowing the land around them, knowing the trees and the birds, and feeling at home in the universe. No amount of money can compensate for the loss of our belongingness. It goes deeper than money. Our alienation from the material world and from the social world goes all the way down to our language, to our basic philosophy, our basic religion, a worldview that holds us separate, says who you are is an individual in a universe of other, in this objective universe out there. Money is just part of that story, of that myth. Money does separate us from each other, and it makes this philosophy or scientific paradigm of objectivity true in our experience. But it's not true. It's breaking down. Not only is the financial system breaking down, but the scientific paradigms underlying that worldview of separation are breaking down. Quantum mechanics explicitly denies that you're a separate observer in an objective universe. But we haven't really digested that yet.
That's true. That's still not mainstream science.
I mean, there's I know people have talked about a culture lag.
Yeah.
Like we're waiting to catch up with this knowledge. It's like there's a period where we're moving almost like ahead of the wave, and it hasn't sort of...
The second part of the wave.
It hasn't exactly like curled over or connected with us yet. It's coming up behind. In a way.
Yeah, I think so. I think we all have a sense that the world that we live in is living on borrowed time. You know, its days are numbered. It's an accurate perception, and different people are coming at it from different directions. You know, even the Christian evangelicals are sensing it. You know, the end of the world is coming. They're right.
It happened on the 21st, I thought, in December.
Yeah, but, I mean, that was the same sentiment.
Same sentiment, yeah.
Same understanding that our system is not sustainable.
Right.
That's not news anymore.
Okay, so we could talk. There was a question last night, and I'll just repeat it. I thought it was a pretty good question. They talked about someone who had more money than they needed, and they were asking you what you would suggest they do with that money if they had.
Right. And basically, I said that hey, all of us are born with different gifts, or receive different gifts, and maybe, and whatever your gift is, you feel the desire to give of that gift to benefit others. Money is no exception. If you've inherited a lot of money from your ancestors, or from an earlier time in your life when you made a lot, or just from having good fortune, good luck, that's a gift. So the proper way to approach investment, I think, is to see the money as a gift and to say, what's the most beautiful way that I can use this gift? And not to necessarily do something heroic and give it all away. I mean, that's great, but it's not this heroic thing that you're supposed to do. I think that we need to trust our natural inclinations to give, to trust that we are beings of gratitude and generosity. And so when you see your wealth as a gift, and you can approach investment that way and say, well, what use of this money is the most beautiful? I'm not using it all right now. I'll let somebody else use it for a while. That could be called an investment or a zero interest loan. And that's a different mindset than how can I maximize the return on this money? You might actually end up making a big return through investing it in the spirit of the gift, but that's not the goal. And one of the principles of the gift is, as Lewis Hyde says, you give it around the corner. You give it into the mystery. You don't contrive the return. So it's not a gift if I give you a gift and I say, okay, Ryan, you have to give this plus even more back to me, and if you don't, I'll sue you. That's not a gift. And that's kind of what an interest-bearing loan is.
Yeah,
right?
But you feel so good when you get your student loan, and you get your loan for your small business to start. You're like, I can't wait to pay back this interest.
Yeah.
In our society, it's a bit different, as it is today. I only have one more question. Did you want to?
I just have one more too.
Okay, you want me to hit it? You want to hit it?
Mine is not economic.
Okay.
Slightly different.
Good.
So you mentioned, Charles, before the abundance and overemphasis on the intellectual in our society. And can you speak to the role of the creator or the artist?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to necessarily, devalue or discount intellectualism. In a way, our society is also very anti-intellectual. But I think that very often when we think that we're forming our beliefs based on evidence and logic, they're actually coming from somewhere else. And we're using the evidence and logic to kind of rationalize and justify the things that we believe. I'm not sure if that's really where you're going with this question. I think that we're nearing a point in time where we can't really figure out the course ahead of us, and we have to begin to rely on other ways of making choices. One example I've been using is, these small acts of kindness, of generosity, of service that, from a big picture perspective, you would say that these can't possibly change the world. It might be taking care of an old lady in a hospice or something like that. She's going to die anyway. How's that going to alter the trajectory of our planet? The rational mind cannot give a reason for that. But there's another part of us that can feel that is a significant act. That's the part we have to start listening to. That's the part that will guide us through times when our logic is no longer operative because the ground rules have changed. All of the things that used to be really practical and our old understanding of cause and effect even seems no longer to operate. We don't know what's real anymore. We don't know how things are going to work anymore. It's a time of incredible uncertainty. How do you make choices in such an environment? You have to go by another guidance system. And I think that the world that we see around us, that the society that we've created with all of its violence and ugliness, is a result of ignoring that other guidance system and sacrificing those small but important things for the sake of the money or for the sake of whatever big cause that you're identified with. Mm-hmm. I think we got to return to what's real and what's right in front of our faces and to accept the guidance of the heart,
Mm-hmm. Now, I remember you mentioned in your lecture about how going back to young people, when someone expresses, I have an interest in art or creation, immediately it's like, well, you should be a graphic designer.
Right. Yeah, I mean, many of our, this goes kind of back to the money system. What kinds of activities does our system reward? Ultimately, it rewards the ones that are going to convert some part of nature into a product or some human relationship into a service. So any gift that you have, any ability, any talent that you have, the economic system and the career counselor says, okay, how can you parlay that into money? How can you use that gift to sell something, to make nature into a product? That's how the system is set up. And maybe that's not where your passion is. Maybe you don't want to take your artistic ability and devote it to graphic design or advertising. Maybe you'd rather create something that's just beautiful to you and to other people and that makes them happy. Maybe your talent for engineering, maybe you don't want to devote that to, fracking. Maybe you want to devote that same talent to designing aquaculture ponds and permaculture things, but there's no money in that, or not as much. So that's why I think that we need to change our money system in order to empower all of these other great ideas that people have.
Okay, so let's say, you were a member of a global movement, and there were chapters all over the world, a lot of young people, a lot of energy, and a lot of ideas that are similar to yours. What would you suggest that these groups of people start doing in their own communities or at a larger level?
There's so many wonderful things to do. People already kind of know those things, and it's not hard to find out. All of these movements, some of the ones you guys are doing, a tool library, urban gardens. There's so many things that people are involved in. So I don't think it's really the question of me telling you what these things are. I think that groups like that, organizations like that, there's some pitfalls that you need to watch out for. One thing is that one function of a group like Zeitgeist is, there's all these people who are in what we could call the old story, in a worldview that they've really grown out of. And so you offer them something bigger. And because it's bigger and because it's different, the first impulse is to say, yes, this is the gospel. This is true. But guess what? Eventually, you're going to grow inside this worldview, and it's going to become confining at some point too. So for the movement to really persist, there has to be some kind of humility, or everyone is going to outgrow it, and it'll age as an organization. So that's one thing I'd like to throw in there. Another thing to watch out for, one of the things that's missing in our society is a strong sense of identity and valuing oneself. So often people will gather together in groups, and whatever the surface opinions, it could be a liberal group, a conservative group, radical, whatever, communist, Tea Party, whatever it is, underneath the different surface opinions, all those groups are the same. Basically the conversation is, I'm really right, and so are you. And unlike those people out there, they're wrong. So let's all get together and be right together and have the correct opinions. And if you, to the extent that your group is about that, what will you accomplish? You will accomplish exactly what you set out to accomplish, which is to walk out of there feeling right. But feeling right is not going to change the world. In fact, there are people with all kinds of idiotic beliefs out there. I don't know, one of them might be your grandmother, who are doing beautiful work despite their opinions. Opinions are vapors in the mind. What really matters is whether people's actions contribute to the experience of connectedness, the experience of oneness. Anybody acting from love, no matter what strange opinions they have, is doing the world a service. So, yeah.
I think it's a great way to end it. You would agree, Lawrence? Okay. So, thank you so much, Charles. It's been such a wonderful weekend to spend with you. Guys, if you are running a chapter and you want a guest speaker, please contact Charles Eisenstein off his website. It's charleseisenstein.net, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, okay. So you can look that up. He has a lot of videos on there. You can see some of his work or obviously read his books. He'll have a new one being released in 2000...
This year sometime.
This year? Okay, 2013. Yeah. We'll look forward to that. And any closing words, Lawrence?
No, just thank you again, and it was a pleasure.
Yeah, this was fun. Yeah.
All right.
Very enjoyable.
Fantastic.
All right.
All right, thanks, guys. Ciao.